What if you could make your best swings, hit your best shots, and play your top level of play without having to think about it at all on the tennis courts? That's what the best competitors at every level of tennis are able to do. They act based on instinct and habit instead of relying on a never-ending merry-go-round of thoughts and reminders to try to will themselves into doing the right things at the right times. Unfortunately, that's never going to work because a critical truth about the human brain is that we can only consciously focus or think about one thing at a time. The human brain is kind of like a spotlight, and we can only shine a light on one very specific thing at a time, and everything else is kind of dark and in the background. Luckily, we have an incredibly deep and powerful subconscious system that is able to do everything for us in the background that we're not focusing on. Things like talking or walking or even breathing. Luckily, we don't have to focus on that. And so all of that is constantly being taken care of in the background. Some of your tennis skills are subconscious in their habits, and you don't have to think about them anymore. But unfortunately for most tennis players, it's not their best skills. And to do their best swings and hit their best shots, tennis players have to constantly be reminding themselves. How do we break away from that? Well, in the last couple lessons, I've talked about this, the improvement circle, and explained how we can use it to bring new skills along through this cycle and be able to bring new subconscious better habits into our game so that we no longer have to think about them anymore. The first two lessons, which I'll link in the first comment down below, brought us up to this section right here, conscious competence, where we have to think about it, but at least we can do it right. And I gave some real world examples with a real student bringing her up to this point. So that leaves us this chunk left. How do we go from being consciously competent, being able to do the right thing while thinking about it, to doing the right thing without thinking about it? This is the holy grail, because now we can release our brain from having to think about that new forehand or that new serve or that new backhand and just do it automatically, naturally, out of habit. And that's where we can really play our best tennis. Whether you're a coach or a player that's trying to guide yourself towards better tennis, it's critical to understand that even though there's technically only one step in this circle between being conscious and subconscious, it's an incredibly big one. So to have the best chance of actually taking a new forehand or backhand or serve or footwork or whatever and putting it deep down into your subconscious, we got to take a lot of little baby steps in between being able to do it right while thinking about it and being able to do it right without thinking about it. That takes time and the right kind of training. What is the right kind of training? Let me show you something that I've actually never shown before in a video online. This is a list of progressions. These are little stepping stones that we can take in between when we first learn about a new skill and being able to do it for real in a match without actually having to think about it. So notice down here, number 32 is real match play. That's like the last progression. And all the way up at the top is segmented shadow swings. That means going through the new motion, doing it correctly, just one piece at a time. So this list is ordered from easiest at the top and then in order all the way down to hardest at the bottom. Red has no ball involved at all. Yellow has a ball involved, but it's highly controlled tosses or feeds. Green has a live rally, but it's a cooperative rally. That means the goal is to keep the rally going. And then blue is competitive rallies. So now we're actually trying to win the point while focusing on whatever it is that you're trying to train and master. Now let's focus in on the ones that are in bold. The ones in bold are the actual progressions that I used with Brenda in the example in lesson 2 of this series. We started with segmented shadow swings. We're working on getting her to use her body on her forehand and not stay sideways and just use her arm. Then we did continuous smooth shadow swings. I tried tossing her a ball, but it didn't work, so we used fake tosses. And then after she could do her new forehand correctly with fake tosses, then we did feeds from the other side of the net where she was on the service line. So it took us those 4 progressions to make our way from her being unconsciously incompetent all the way to being consciously competent from the service line. So do you think that if she left the court with me, able to do her new forehand from the service line with an underhand toss and went and played a match, do you think that she'd be able to use her new kinetic chain, her new and improved forehand in match play? The answer is absolutely not. There's no chance. Look at how many steps are between where we left off, which was right here, and match play, all the way down at the bottom. 21 progressions in between. And all of these progressions in between are more difficult. They're a higher degree of challenge. Remember what we started off talking about. Your brain can only consciously focus on one thing at a time. So if she were to go play a match, well, in match play, there's all kinds of other things we're trying to manage and be aware of and adjust for while we try to beat our opponent. Things like their strengths and their weaknesses. Like it takes mental concentration to analyze and figure those things out. What patterns are working? What patterns are not working? Or figuring out the tempo of the rallies and syncing up your footwork so that you're moving smoothly. Now, hopefully, some of those things are subconscious, but everybody, myself included, is in a different place with their level of competency with all those different and hundreds and thousands of other little individual skills that make up the game of tennis. So if I threw her into a match the very next day and I was like, okay, Brenda, use your new forehand. Go, do it. There's no way she'd use her new forehand because now she has to manage and keep track of and try to do a good job of dozens and dozens and dozens of other things, which all are part of the task of trying to win a tennis match. The only way Brenda's new forehand is ever going to show up in real match play is if she goes home and spends hours of time doing these 4 progressions that we worked on that brought her up to consciously competent, and then continues down this list and continues to push herself a little further while doing the new forehand consciously. And then eventually, through repetition and advancing her level of challenge and pressure on that new stroke, she would eventually be able to make her way down to doing it in real match play. Does she need to do all of these progressions to make it to match play? No, she doesn't need to do all of them. But I can tell you for sure that if she skips from number 10 down to number 32, there's no chance that it's going to show up in match play. So it needs to be at least a couple of these other stepping stones in between. How long is that going to take? Like, how many hours are we talking about? How many days or weeks or like months? Like, oh my gosh, how are we going to know when we actually get to the place where our old habit has been replaced by a new one? Well, it comes down to 4 different criteria. Number 1, how frequently does Brenda repeat the new habit? If she only practices her new forehand like once a month, and then she plays tennis another 20 times where she does the old habit, that's not going to cut it. She's never going to actually replace her old habit with the new one. So frequency is important. Quality of training is also really important. If she does, let's say, an hour of practice of her new forehand, is her mind constantly distracted? And is she like checking her phone and like taking a water break for half an hour and then kind of doing 10 minutes of her old forehand and then finally realizing, oh no, that's my old forehand, and doing a little bit more of the new forehand? That quality of training is not going to lead her to actually doing the new forehand in real life very quickly. It's going to take a little bit longer. And that leads me directly into the third thing. How often does she do the old habit? If half the time she does the new one and half the time she does the old one, then we're not really tipping things very aggressively in favor of just sticking with the new one. Your brain has to be kind of saturated in the new and better habit over and over again for a certain period of time before we ever have any chance of replacing our old habit with the new one. And that leads me to qualification number 4. How athletic are we? How talented are we? How coordinated are we? How much awareness do we have of our body? I work with some students who immediately after telling them, hey, we should really be doing it this way, they can tell the difference. And if they go back to the old one for one swing, they're like, oh crap, no, that's the old one. I don't want to do it that way. That doesn't happen very often, to be totally honest with you, with kind of normal, everyday, non-professional athletes. Other athletes never have a clue unless I tell them, by the way, that last swing was your old swing. And they're like, nuh-uh. And then I have to show them on the iPad, yeah, like you went back to your old one there. And most of us are somewhere in between. And so these are the dials that we can turn to make it either very likely or not likely at all, or impossible that we'll ever actually develop any new unconscious or subconscious habits. This is very different from the status quo out there, isn't it? Like, it feels to me like in normal day-to-day tennis life, people take a lesson, it lasts like an hour, they work on everything in that hour. They like hit some ground strokes, hit some volleys, hit some serves, coach and student high fives. Then the student goes off and plays a bunch of matches and then comes back the next week for another lesson. How are you supposed to develop a new subconscious habit that actually sticks, that actually replaces the old habits, if that's the cycle you're going through? Honestly, I think the status quo of lesson taking and match playing and lesson taking and match playing is broken. And I think players, you need to take responsibility for your homework. It's not good enough to just take a lesson once a week and then play a bunch of matches and then take a lesson and then play a bunch of matches and expect to change your habits. I'm sorry, but unless your talent level is incredibly high, you're going to plateau and level out very quickly. And coaches, you're not off the hook. You need to set the expectation very clearly with your students that when they leave the court after your 1 hour lesson, that's just the beginning. That's not the end. And like, congratulations, high five, like we fixed your serve or we fixed your forehand. No, like that's just the beginning of the path that your student is going to be on if they're ever going to master that new skill. You need to educate them on the process that it takes to actually replace their old habits with new and better ones.